Good evening and welcome to the Williston Development and Review Board for September 14th, 2021. I'm Pete Kelly, Chair of the DRB. Welcome to the applicants and public participants. Please sign in by renaming yourself on the participant toolbar or commenting in the chat. That's for those that are participating virtually via Zoom. This is a hybrid meeting taking place in the town hall meeting and virtually on Zoom. All members of the board and the public can communicate in real time. Planning staff will provide Zoom instructions for public participation before the hearings are open. All votes taken in the meeting that are not unanimous will be done by roll call vote in accordance with the law. If Zoom crashes, the meeting will be continued to September 28th, 2021. Let's start the meeting by taking a roll call of attendance of all DRB members participating in the meeting. Paul Christensen.
Paul, you'll need to unmute yourself. It looks like he's speaking, but the audio's not going through. I think I know why. One second. Paul, can you introduce yourself again?
Okay.
Okay, yep, that was nice.
We're getting some
feedback.
Yeah, we'll get it figured out.
There's a computer that's got needs to shut its audio off.
What I'm trying to figure out is how I can do these two as the screens and then your stuff as the speaker. Yeah. Trying to figure out if there's a way I can turn off the microphone and just have the speaker going. I could just plug the HDMI back into yours. Want to do that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Are you guys waiting on me?
No, we're waiting on technical difficulties.
Oh, okay.
And there's some more folks joining in from the Zoom waiting room. Welcome to the DRB meeting. We're just getting going with some technical difficulties. I think we can resume the attendance.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's continue with Paul. Thanks for everybody's patience. Paul Christensen.
Present.
Thank you. John Hemmelgarn.
Present.
Scott Riley is, are you present? I think you're going to recuse yourself.
Yes, sir. I am recusing myself. I am recusing myself due to the applicant is a business partner.
Got it. Dave Saladino.
Present.
Dave Turner.
Present.
Dave Turner, you might need to be attending these in person to help with your technical skills.
No problem. I have faith in
That was
Emily.
all me. Sorry, guys.
That was not at you, Scott. That was us, not the town of Williston. Okay, so at this point, I will turn it over to Emily to give some instructions on Zoom.
All right. Assuming you all still trust me on how to use Zoom. For in-person attendees tonight, I'm not seeing anybody with a laptop who's connected to Zoom, but if you do use Zoom in here, keep your microphone off, your camera off, or speaker off. For the participants who are joining on Zoom, there's a lot of features on your toolbar. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking and your video off or on to your preference. You can use the chat feature on the toolbar with Zoom technical questions if you're having trouble hearing or seeing. If you would like to speak when we open it up for public comment, you can press the raise hand button on the reaction section of the toolbar or let us know in the chat. There is also the option if anyone's joining by telephone, if you're watching live on CCTV and would like to join in, you can dial in, press *9 to raise your hand and *6 to mute or unmute.
Okay.
For optimizing your view, we are going to do some screen share tonight. On the top of the toolbar, you'll see a green bar. Click View Options in side-by-side mode. Drag that slider bar in order to optimize your screen view. And if you're having trouble hearing or seeing with your internet connection, you can turn off your video, close other tabs or programs. You can also press the up arrow next to the microphone to leave your computer audio and join by telephone. Again, if you're having any technical difficulties during the meeting, please message me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Emily. First up is a public forum. This is an opportunity for anyone in the audience or here present in the town meeting room to speak on topics that are not on tonight's agenda. So this is an opportunity to address the board on issues that are not on tonight's agenda. If you have something, please raise your hand in Zoom.
No raised hands and no chats.
Okay. We have one applicant for tonight. Is DP 21-18, the Snyder Group, for a pre-app for a proposed mixed-use development of 243 dwelling units in the Taft Corners zoning district. First, if the applicants, you're very familiar to us, but if you would state your name and address for the record, please, that would be appreciated.
I'm Chris Snyder with Snyder Homes or Snyder Group, and address is 4076 Shelburne Road, Shelburne, Vermont.
Andy Rowe with Lamoureux and Dickinson, 14 Morris Drive, Essex.
Welcome. Is this yours, Matt?
Yes, I'll be reading the staff report.
Okay. Staff is up.
Okay. I'll just start by saying, as a fairly large project, the staff report is somewhat lengthy and covers a lot of ground. To the chair or members of the DRB using raise hand on Zoom, and if you, Emily or Pete, you see that, just stop me where I am. I won't be offended if you interrupt, and we can go into clarifications or slow down as needed. So this is an application for pre-application review of a new project. The Snyder Group Incorporated requests pre-application review of a proposed mixed-use development involving 243 dwelling unit equivalents, or 278 dwelling units, including carriage homes, townhomes, multifamily buildings, and singles, and a 65-unit senior housing facility at what is currently known in town as the Essex Alliance Church property. This is 54.1 acres, located on Beaudry Lane and north of Knight Lane, Chelsea Place, and Dunmore Road. It is entirely contained in the Taft Corners zoning district. A portion of this property is developed with a single household dwelling and a segment of public multi-use path and a segment of Alpine Drive from Route 2A to the Vermont State Employees Credit Union, but otherwise the parcel is vacant. So this project is, as I said, in the Taft Corners district. It is in our design review district, so it has received a preliminary review from the Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee, has also received preliminary review from the Conservation Commission, and both of those groups have provided comments that we'll be going over tonight, as well as interdepartmental review and the normal staff comments related to how this project lines up with current zoning. Tonight, the staff is recommending that the DRB take testimony, close this hearing, deliberate on a slate of recommendations tonight, and approve those recommendations. This pre-application, because it is for a residential project, if approved by the DRB, results in adopted recommendations, a determination regarding the requirement for a traffic study or not, and an authorization for the applicant to move to the growth management phase of development review, which happens once a year toward the end of March. So if this was moved forward by the DRB, it would appear next at growth management in March of 2022. This is the first time that the DRB is reviewing the current proposal. Recent history for this parcel includes permitting for the Essex Alliance Church, now withdrawn. However, there was a portion of multi-use path and pedestrian bridge over the Allen Brook leading to the facility constructed, but none of the church facility was ever constructed. Staff has otherwise in the report recited the permit review history for both the Essex Alliance Church as well as a project prior to the Essex Alliance Church that was proposed for a 55-unit residential subdivision, and a prior subdivision to that going back to 1995, another subdivision proposed in 1987. But this is the first time a project of this sort has been reviewed on this property. First outing with the DRB. Project did receive review from the Conservation Commission on August 18th, 2021, and the Conservation Commission's recommendations have been included in the draft recommendations for the Development Review Board to consider tonight. Most of those recommendations are standard. However, there's a specific recommendation relating to shifting the road, dwellings, and urban park to minimize impact to wetland buffers, and to provide ample space between the buildings and watershed buffer tree line to avoid hazard tree conflicts with abutting homes. In other words, when new homes are constructed close to naturally existing trees and wetlands, sometimes those trees' fall zones overlap with the homes, and the result is that the trees are removed. So when there's assumption they might be retained during review, that ends up not happening because of the proximity of the dwellings. We did receive comments from police, fire, and public works as well. There are some comments mixed into those memos that fall beyond the jurisdiction of the DRB or the purview of the zoning bylaw, but they can be included as recommendations that the applicant work with those departments to address those concerns. As a way of example, we had a comment from the police department regarding the intersection of Alpine Drive and Route 2A. So there's a concern about traffic at that location. Route 2A is a state highway. The interaction would be between the applicant and the Vermont Agency of Transportation to talk about how that impact would work. There are also some comments about marking of streets, signs, speed control devices, etc. When things are happening in the street or the public right-of-way, they're controlled by the Williston Public Works specifications under the purview of the Public Works Director. As well as some perhaps internal conflicts related to street trees and their placement, which is also an element of the public works specifications. In general, when we're looking at a project like this, at the pre-application level, we're encouraging the applicant to reach out to all of those departments and department heads involved to work out those concerns. So project elements. As I mentioned, we have two kinds of land use proposed in this project, a residential use as well as senior living, which falls under the categorization of healthcare and social assistance. And the comments there are residential uses are encouraged in this district, and as it relates to senior housing, at the following stage of review called discretionary permit, the DRB would need to make findings that on-site services at the senior living facility provided would qualify the use as senior living. Members of the public might not be as familiar with this. The DRB is quite familiar with the consideration of a senior living facility and being able to make supportable findings as to its positioning within our bylaw as a senior living or a healthcare social assistance use as opposed to a straight residential use that has implications for how it's treated in the town's growth management and residential density metrics under the bylaw. In terms of dimensional standards, Williston does have building height and setback requirements. This development is anticipated to be able to meet those. Setbacks in this area include 25-foot setbacks from Route 2A, with a requirement that along other roads, buildings be brought to the sidewalk. There is an exception for up to 30% of a building's frontage that might not need to be brought to a sidewalk if that building includes an entry plaza or courtyard. The DRB may also permit exceptions for accessible parking and where the terrain and necessary grading would make bringing the building up to the sidewalk impractical. Probably not a lot of exceptions for grade or terrain on this site as it is quite flat. In terms of outdoor sales and storage, that's not an anticipated use because we don't have retail commercial. However, that sort of use, if it were to take place, is limited to events like farmers markets or occasional sidewalk sales. Outdoor storage that is associated with residential uses is regulated under a separate chapter in our bylaw. In terms of development pattern, there's a land use policy in the Williston Comprehensive Plan that calls for development of a design-conscious, pedestrian-friendly, mixed-use town center in the heart of Williston's growth center where this project is located. And there are standards within Williston's bylaw chapter for the Taft Corners District under 41.5.1 and .2 that require certain building design elements and orientation to invite pedestrians into those buildings and make the buildings themselves more appealing. These standards will apply at subsequent pre-application and discretionary permit review processes for buildings or phases of the development. In Taft Corners, we also have a set of mandatory design criteria. This is known as the 5 of 9 collectively. So the bylaw lists a number of elements that need to be included in developments in the Taft Corners district to the point where at least 5 of them have been selected. The staff report lists 6 of the required elements that this project is eligible to be able to provide, including residential uses with affordable units included, structured parking, structures that have multiple stories, wide sidewalks, public art component, and urban park. I want to mention something that comes up here in the staff report about specific plan. There's a recommendation drafted that encouraged but does not require a specific plan in the case of this project. And the reason we're bringing it up at all is because the town is currently engaged in a major rewriting of the development standards for the Taft Corners area in the entire growth center, including this district. And to some degree, there is a chance that new development standards that are different from the standards of the bylaw today could be in place before this project reaches the discretionary permit stage of review or before subsequent phases of this project reach the discretionary permit stage of review. A project vests, i.e. has the benefit of the version of the bylaw that exists at the time that a complete application for discretionary permit review is filed. In order for an application for a residential project to be complete, that project needs growth management allocation, which, as I mentioned, will not happen until at least March of 2022. So we have some time between now and then during which there is a possibility that the development standards in this district will change. A specific plan is essentially a planned unit development or a write-your-own zoning process. It's a legislative process that takes place with the Planning Commission and ultimately the Select Board. And at the end of the day, what the applicant would be creating under something like that would be its own sub-zoning district with a specific site plan that it then has the benefit of moving forward. So this is not something I think that has come up with the Development Review Board ever or in a very long time. It's an added process. It's intended to still meet the goals of the town plan while clarifying elements of the bylaw that would be applicable to the project. And there are a number of elements of the bylaw, including perhaps the growth management or phasing schedule of the project, that could be clarified through that process, while also committing the applicant and the town to a specific plan of development, which would then operate independent of future changes in zoning. So Long way of saying that's something that we want to address because the change of the development standards may happen across the course of this project or a portion of this project. Moving on, in the Taft Corners District, there is discussion of Adirondack Views. And so there are views of the Adirondacks in a significant part of the Taft Corners area. Applications for discretionary permits in this district must show how views to the Adirondacks, where they exist, will be used as a feature of the proposed development. It doesn't mean that these views need to be left unimpeded, but that developments must find a way to use that natural asset. Compliant with this standard could take a variety of forms, including but not limited to an urban park or how that park is positioned on the site with views to the west, windows from indoor public spaces and buildings that face to the west, or outdoor dining areas or other outdoor elements either on or adjacent to buildings that take advantage of that view. Under the bylaw, in the discussion of vested rights, non-conforming lots, uses, and structures, as I mentioned, we have a major project underway that could change the version of the bylaws before this project becomes vested. All of that said, tonight, the DRB and applicant should be focused on the bylaw requirements as they exist today, but with an understanding that they may be different in the future. And I discussed the timing of that vesting and the relationship of that to the possibility of specific plan. There's also the possibility that some of this project happens under the current rules and future phases happen under future rules. Were that to happen, anything that has its discretionary permit, its administrative permit, or has begun construction would remain vested in the version of the bylaws under which it was permitted. So under that, there's a question for the DRB to consider, which is, this is pre-application, it leads to growth management, which would lead to a discretionary permit application. The staff would recommend that the first discretionary permit application for this project include an overall street and path layout plat of subdivision, identifying park spaces, utility locations, and all of those things, and that subsequent permitting would be for individual buildings or phases of buildings under a pre-application and then discretionary permit review sequence. This is essentially the process that was followed for the multi-phase and multi-amendment Finney Crossing project to the south. And that plat showing the streets, et cetera, might be adjusted throughout that process, but we would want the discretionary permit at the outset to have a complete plan for infrastructure and a detailed plan for the residential phase that would be constructed under that first approval. And as I mentioned, we have that recommendation for specific plan in the project. And really, there's a number of things that the bylaw controls that could be refined under that process. I mentioned growth management, but you could talk about building setbacks and height, residential density to promote affordable housing, walkability, wetland buffer requirements, et cetera. And I will note that under that separate specific plan process, there's an element of a required substantial public benefit. And when the Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee reviewed this project, they did talk a little bit about that and made some suggestions in their recommendations of, should the applicant choose that path, what they thought might make a good benefit on the project. I've said it a couple of times, but if authorized at pre-application, this project will be eligible for growth management in March of 2022. There is a recommendation in motion related to growth management included in the draft recommendations for the DRB. So residential growth management is a competitive process in which the project would be reviewed under a number of metrics which are listed there in the staff report, including energy conservation, affordable housing, housing choice, neighborhood space, paths and trails, open space conservation, design, transportation, and sustainability of transportation, as well as, that's all of them. Projects receive a score under that growth management system on a 100-point scale. A project needs to score at least 30 points to receive allocation and move forward. If a project were to receive 70 points or more under that system and achieve the highest level of energy conservation incentivized by the chapter, it would be exempt from the growth management process and would be able to proceed without receiving allocation under growth management. Moving on to sort of the nuts and bolts of the site. In terms of access and connectivity and traffic studies, there are 3 points of access to the site proposed by the applicant. The primary entrance onto Route 2A via Alpine Drive, north of the Vermont State Employees Credit Union. Chelsea Place between 74 Chelsea Place and 244 Dunmore Lane, where there's a platted street access planned for since the development of those projects. And Beaudry Lane, a private driveway with access to Route 2A to the north of the site. Under access management in Williston's bylaw, this project is anticipated to be able to comply with the access. We have 3 points of access, and then individual driveways and parking lots within the project accessed from consolidated curb cuts. The Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee did recommend shared driveways for the duplexes and carriage homes on the site to reduce the number of curb cuts onto the street that interrupt the sidewalks. Intersections and driveways within the neighborhood would need to also comply with the standards of Williston's access chapter. In terms of bicycle and pedestrian access and access for the disabled, compliance with these standards is anticipated. The applicant is proposing a multi-use path as well as sidewalks along public and private streets within the project. Discretionary permit applications for this project must show how sidewalks or paths, pavement markings and textures, signs, and similar techniques are used to minimize conflicts between pedestrians, cyclists, and vehicles. Furthermore, the pre-application and discretionary permit review for the senior living facility may include pedestrian drop-offs and access for the disabled unique to that use. In terms of providing multiple points of access to the site, because we have those 3 compliances anticipated, Williston's standard is that no more than 40 dwellings may be served by a dead-end or cul-de-sac road. Where access is required, it needs to meet the standards for a public or private road per the public works specifications. We have had some comment letters, which I'll talk about a little later, that have requested the DRB require the Chelsea Place connection be a pedestrian path with emergency vehicle access only. But per the Williston bylaw 13.5.4, the DRB can only permit an exception to this standard for non-residential development, such as an industrial plant. A road connection to this parcel was anticipated when Chelsea Commons was developed in the early 1990s under SUB 96-3, and a stub of that street is paved to the east of 74 Chelsea Place. In terms of connectivity between this proposed project and other neighborhoods, those 3 main points of connectivity should be retained, and a recommendation to that effect is included in the draft motion. We do have a little bit of discussion about the Beaudry Lane access to talk about, as that's a little different from our other 2 tonight. Discussing traffic study, the DRB can request a traffic study at the pre-application stage of review. Staff has drafted a recommendation requesting that, and the traffic study should analyze demand with and without a connection to Route 2A via Beaudry Lane. When the DRB is requesting a traffic study, the purpose of that study is to determine if the new vehicle trips generated by the project would warrant any intersection improvements on neighboring roadways to manage traffic delays. Traffic studies do not analyze vehicle speeds or pedestrian safety. We have some comments from the police chief, as well as several comment letters from citizens discussing vehicle speed and roadway design, including street lighting in the area. We do have Dunmore Lane, Chelsea Place, and Zephyr Road as public roads adjacent to the project, maintained by the Department of Public Works with their design controlled by the Public Works specifications. Those are separate departments and ordinances from the zoning under which we're reviewing the project tonight. Similarly, vehicle speed control measures and on-street parking are managed by the Department of Public Works per select board policy. So, no parking areas and speed limits are things that ultimately go to the select board on the advice of the Public Works Director. So, zooming in a little bit on Beaudry Lane, this is an existing private unpaved driveway off Route 2A with a 50-foot right-of-way width. The Department of Public Works comment memo states that the right-of-way in Beaudry Lane shall meet our standards. Public street in this location would require expanding that right-of-way from 50 feet to 64 feet in order to meet the Public Works specifications. Expanding the right-of-way by those 14 feet would require private negotiations with 4 abutting properties, and those properties either obtain access or have frontage along Beaudry Lane. So in order to comply with access and connectivity standards of the zoning bylaw, staff doesn't recommend reducing access from 3 points to 2. We have that 40 dwelling unit limit that I mentioned, and we also have a discussion in our access chapter that interconnected street and trail systems will be required wherever they are not precluded by physical barriers, including property ownership, historic land use patterns, and difficult terrain. The DRB may want to ask for a legal opinion in this matter. A pre-application recommendation is written for the DRB to make that request. The 50-foot wide private driveway existed prior to the adoption of the current public works specifications. So the staff is asking the DRB to consider whether that should be treated as a type of existing nonconformity and whether a public street could be constructed within that dimension. If it could not be constructed as a public street, could a driveway be upgraded to a private street or a simple wider paved driveway that would help provide access to the site? In terms of parking, discretionary permit applications for this project will need to include vehicular parking, ADA parking, and end-of-trip facility, bicycle parking for employees, as well as bicycle parking shown for residents and storage, outdoor parking, etc. If the units in the multifamily portion of the project are not equipped with private garages or sheds, bicycle parking will need to be shown for those. In terms of on-site vehicle and pedestrian circulation, road sidewalks and crosswalks will need to comply with the town standards for those things. Signs and streetlights will need to meet compliance with the public works specifications. In terms of required on-site infrastructure as it relates to neighborhood parks, the staff does anticipate the applicant will be able to comply with this requirement. The bylaw discusses parks in what it calls the open space plan. This is now Town Plan Section 4.5 on neighborhood parks, as well as the overarching goals of chapters 9 and 13 of that plan. The Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee did provide some comment in their memo about park layout, the neighborhood muse as proposed, and the fire department also requested drivable access on the 10-foot walking path in the park. In terms of private utilities such as cable, electrical power, and natural gas, those utilities would need to be shown on the plans at the discretionary permit stage of review. In terms of municipal water and municipal sewer disposal, compliance with the standards of the bylaw is anticipated. The Department of Public Works did comment that sewer along Route 2A should be investigated. So if you look at the map on the staff report there, the map is blue because all of this is in the town's sewer service area, but we do have some gravity and force main in the area. We do not have either type of sewer line in the right-of-way of Route 2A adjacent to this project, going up toward the north, that black line on the map. So Public Works is asking to consider whether that's something that should happen to help this project connect. In terms of on-site maintenance, the discretionary permit application for this project must meet the requirements for the maintenance of landscaping, urban parks and open space, snow removal and snow storage, and the removal of solid waste. In terms of bylaw standards related to litter, the discretionary permit must include a plan for trash and recycling receptacles throughout the neighborhood to serve users of the development. And in terms of solid waste containers, i.e. dumpsters and trash cans, shall be screened from view. Buildings specifically for the purpose of storing trash and recycling dumpsters should not be located along a sidewalk or public or private street. Consolidated waste management for carriage homes, duplexes, and townhomes is also preferred as opposed to individual totes for each residence. In regards to residential density, the applicant is proposing 278 total dwellings, including 70 one-bedroom units. The one-bedroom units in Williston count as 1/2 of a dwelling unit equivalent, and that's why we have 278 units and 243 dwelling unit equivalents. In Williston, both residential density and units for the purposes of assigning growth management allocation are based on the dwelling unit equivalent metric. It is anticipated that the number of units and type of unit, including the one-bedroom or studio, will change as the project moves from concept planning to detailed phase development. Each discretionary permit application in this project must include a density calculation based on a current constraints analysis of watershed and wetland buffers and a current count of the types of units constructed and proposed in the project at 15 dwelling units per acre. Currently, the applicant is not proposing affordable housing or a transfer of development rights. The staff has prepared an analysis of density on the project based on those metrics as they're expressed in today's bylaw. Somewhere between 5 and 15 dwelling units per acre would render a total amount of dwelling unit equivalents allowed between 162 and 487. The applicant at 243 equivalents proposed would comply with the density requirements of the bylaw. In addition to the 5 of 9 design criteria and other site elements that are discussed under the Taft Corners Zoning District chapter, there's also a design review overlay that applies to this property. The Historic and Architectural Advisory Committee reviews and provides comments for all projects within the design review district. In looking at this project, the HAC looked mostly at the layout and public gathering places as they're proposed in the concept review, understanding that there will be further review of building design as those elements come together in discretionary permits. The HAC did request that the project should provide a variety of architectural styles, both modern and traditional, especially for the carriage homes and duplexes throughout the neighborhood, and some specific elements such as balconies, varied facade depth, strong cornices on the tops of the apartment and senior living buildings to break up the scale and massing, and in general, avoid a boxy appearance to those buildings. We move over and talk a little bit about landscaping. The DRB does need to make some recommendations here about how landscape buffers in the chapter related to landscaping in our bylaw will be applied to this proposal. Staff is recommending overall that the wider buffers that are available are selected with some additional plantings. The buffers we're talking about right now are for the exterior boundaries of the parent parcel of the development, so the outside edges of the existing parcel, as opposed to the interior buffers. And we're using the mixed use category for the new development because we have the senior housing use as well as the residential use on the property. And when you compare that to the adjacent land uses, this is what provides you with the table of potential landscape buffers that could be applied to the project that you'll see on the bottom of that page of the staff report. Within the interior of the project, you need to follow your street tree and parking lot landscaping requirements. There's some requirements for landscaping to screen utilities, et cetera, but for landscape buffers, we're talking about the exterior of the project. And specifically, there's a little bit of discussion in the report here about the buffer between this project and the Chelsea Place and Half Moon Circle properties, where either a type 3 or 4 buffer is available. Staff was recommending the use of the type 4 buffer because it requires more major trees per 100-foot section, and it appears to be most appropriate for uses of a similar intensity, residential backing up to residential. We've discussed street trees a couple of times. Suffice to say that they are required both by the Public Works specifications, Williston's chapter on street trees, as well as our landscaping chapter. In terms of conservation areas, the subject parcel is within an area mapped as a significant wildlife habitat area. It has designations of both core habitat and wildlife travel corridor under those resources. Our bylaw requires that projects that impact that kind of designated land have a habitat disturbance assessment prepared by a qualified wildlife biologist and submitted by the applicant as part of the discretionary permit application. There are some other types of natural resources that Williston regulates that are not applicable to this property. That includes uncommon, rare, threatened, and endangered species, unique natural communities, farmlands of local importance, and scenic viewshed. We do not have those elements on this parcel. In terms of special flood hazard areas, or what most people know of as flood zones, we do not have any development within special flood hazard areas proposed. All of the flood hazard area is also covered by a watershed protection buffer to the Allen Brook. The Conservation Commission does recommend that no development occur within the flood zone. So we do have some recommendations related to the watershed health implications of the project. As I mentioned, the Allen Brook traverses along the northern and eastern boundaries of the site. The Conservation Commission recommends the existing tree line be used to demarcate the watershed protection buffer of the Allen Brook, and that informational signage be posted along the tree line. Additionally, dwellings should be located far enough away from the existing line so as not to be a target for potential hazard trees. The intent with that recommendation is to prevent the unnecessary cutting of trees when they are too proximate to the homes. There are also Class 2 and Class 3 wetlands on the subject parcel. These are shown on the site plan. If the previous wetland delineation was done prior to 2016, a new delineation should be constructed. Wetland delineations in Vermont are good for 5 years. The site plan shows a park and activity center that appears to encroach into a wetland buffer. The Conservation Commission drafted a recommendation asking to shift this area to the west so it aligns with the upland area on the site in order to reduce impacts to the wetlands. Also, you have some street impacts to wetlands. Alpine Drive crosses the Class 2 wetland and wetland buffer, and the street connecting to Chelsea Place appears to cross a Class 3 wetland and wetland buffer. Under Williston's watershed protection chapter, road crossings of wetlands and buffers are permitted within watershed protection buffers, but the width and length of such crossings must be minimized. The applicant has stated the Class 3 wetlands do not provide any significant wetland functions. The Conservation Commission may request documentation of the functional assessment, or if not available, require an assessment to be conducted. Williston's bylaw has a few other things that it does regulate. Outdoor lighting and the discretionary permit application for various phases of this project will need to include outdoor lighting plans showing compliance with that chapter. Signs and public art are also regulated by the zoning in Williston, and a master sign plan may be required at discretionary permit if signs larger or more numerous are proposed on individual parcels, particularly the senior living facility. I think we've also found in larger projects sometimes a residential master sign plan covering any development signs at entrances is useful. In terms of impact fees on this project, Williston does assess school, transportation, and recreation impact fees for residential units, as well as transportation impact fees for commercial units. Those fees are assessed when administrative permits are submitted to construct new units in a project. So generally not something that the DRB modifies or could modify, but just want to mention that we do have impact fees that would apply to this project. So all of that said, the staff has prepared a set of draft recommendations and a draft motion that would allow this project to move forward to the growth management stage of review with these recommendations. You'll find attached to the staff report memorandums from Police, Fire, and Public Works, as well as transmittals on the website related to HAC and Conservation Commission review. So I will stop there.
Thank you, Matt. Very comprehensive. So before I turn it over to the applicant, I want to let people know that are participating either here in person or by virtually by Zoom, that the sequence of what's going to happen next. So I'm going to give the applicant an opportunity to address the board. Then the DRB members are going to have an opportunity to ask the applicant questions. And then at the conclusion of that sequence, then we'll open it up for public comment. So I just wanted to make sure that those who are interested in making a public comment are going to have that opportunity after the sequence that I just described. So with that, I will turn it over to the applicant for you to address the board, add anything that you would like before we transition to the DRB questions.
Do you want mask on or mask off, or?
I think mask. I think it's your call.
Yeah.
Yeah, your call. You're in your little pod right there.
Yeah, it's your.
I spent a lot of time with this guy, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's your call, Chris.
Okay. Well, I think it's easier to communicate and hear our voices. So thank you very much for allowing us to come and present our pre-application for the Williston property. And I do appreciate both the comments, all the comments from the HAC, the Conservation Commission, Department of Public Works, and the other, and fire departments as well. And as you can tell, there is some history to this property, the existing property, and as everybody should understand, the property was previously approved by the town and state for development. The church, the Essex Alliance Church, has decided not to proceed with the approved plans, and Snyder Homes currently has an option to proceed to purchase the property that will include several different housing types as outlined in our application. In our application, there was a overview of a lot of information and sort of talks a little bit about what the ideas are and the thoughts are behind it. And I don't know, Emily, if you can pull up the application so that people can see it on the screen, the presentation package. And I'd like to just walk through that if possible, and so people understand what the goals and ideas are here. So this property, we have been working for many months on developing a overall idea and plan for the property, understanding the rules and regulations that are currently in place within the Taft Corner zoning district. Page number 2, we're going to talk a little bit about connections and how one of the things is we have housing connections, we have people connections, but we also have connections with bike paths and utilization of the outdoors and connecting to areas within the growth center. And I happened to be in Williston in the growth center right before this and noticed all of the people walking their dogs and going to the stores and utilizing the benefits of living within the Taft Corner zoning district. So I think it's important to talk a little bit about how we're connecting people. Sort of unexpected. Well, we have some unexpected ideas here in that we have a large park in the middle of the plan. And the other piece is we have different product types and different home types that we're going to be showing and describing and creating over time as we move through this process. Playful. Again, we don't want it to be too rigid. We don't want it to be too we want to be pedestrian oriented, and we also want it to be a great place to live. And so our focus is how do we make it different and than what we've seen over the years. And so that's something that we're trying to create here. Then we have community, and there's going to be lots of different types of homes within the neighborhood, and we want to also connect to some of the existing community components within Taft Corner zoning district. As we get into more of the details of what this neighborhood is about, and it's really a place called home. And we build homes for people, and we service the need of the public by building homes within growth centers and within this particular zoning district. And it's really important because home is where we all go home. We all go back to at night, and there are people, a lot of people who want to live here in Williston, and they want to live connected. They want to live within the areas surrounding Williston. They want to utilize those spaces, but yet we need to create different home types because there are multiple types of tenants or owners. And so you'll notice that we do have a very different look because they're not all the same types of homes throughout the neighborhood. But they are homes. Go to the next page. And again, this is just a little bit more description about homes and the different types of homes that we're going to be providing, and you'll see as we get further into this description. The next is the regional map. And so we show this really as, hey, within a 10-minute walk, you can really be in a lot of places within the Taft Corner zoning district from this particular site. If you expanded that to like a 12-minute walk, and we probably should have done that, out to, you would actually get to Route 2. And so it's really not that much further to get all the way to Route 2. And so we'll certainly update that to get the 12-minute walk, but did want to show that there is going to be connectivity, walkable connectivity, and I think that's really an important component to our overall design of the neighborhood. 10-minute context, it's just a little bit more detailed, and then we can keep going on. So environmental constraints. We do have some environmental constraints within the property. One, we have the Allen Brook located to the northern portion of the property, and then there are also some Class 2 wetlands that are located on the midwestern portion of the property. And we're trying to utilize some of those areas as open spaces and park areas, along with utilizing the upland area, which is located within the center of the Class 2 wetlands. Next, the plan and the program. This really outlines and is a good description of the different home types. And as you can see on here, there are 6 different housing types located within this proposed neighborhood. We have carriage homes, we have duplexes, we have townhomes, which are either 2s, 3s, or 4s, and then we have some front-loaded townhomes. Those are 2, 3s, or 4s as well. And then we have some apartment buildings, and then a senior housing building. I think it's really important to note when looking at this plan, one of the things that was extremely important to me was that we match housing types that are abutting existing property owners. So when you look at Chelsea Place, those are townhomes, those are duplexes, triplexes, and I think there is one 4-unit building in there as well. Our plan is to build duplexes directly behind them so that it was relatable in terms of the different home types between the two products. The same is along the Half Moon Lane. We have carriage homes, which are backed up to existing carriage homes as well. The other piece that I think is important to note is that we have located the apartment buildings towards the front of the property, which is directly adjacent to existing commercial buildings and commercial uses, which we assume are going to remain as commercial. And that because they are taller buildings, that those are more relatable directly adjacent to the commercial buildings versus in someone's backyard. So I think that was a real big focus for us, is matching housing types along the buffer lines, and then also trying to figure out how to create density within the neighborhood that meets the Taft Corner zoning district goals. So I think those are really our focal points and pieces that we took with us while we were in the initial planning phase. As mentioned, there are 3 proposed connection location. Alpine Drive would be the primary connection. Alpine Drive is already constructed. It is already there and has, it may need to be slightly adjusted depending upon traffic studies with connections to Route 2A. Beaudry Lane is shown as a potential connection, and then a secondary connection to Dunmore Lane that was, as mentioned by Matt, has already been designed and planned for during the Chelsea Place development process. The overall density of the property is, first off, the property is located within the designated growth center, and so the goal is to from the town's planning perspective, from our perspective, is to increase density within these Taft Corners zoning district. And so I think that we've sort of tried to, as you can see from Matt and Emily's review, there certainly could have been a lot more units designed if there were TDRs or affordable housing units. And what we've tried to say is, hey, based upon what we know and what we would like to do, we're sort of in the middle of the density components, but yet also still meeting the town goals. This property also has paths and connectivity. There is an important connection. This really connects the bike path from Butternut to the north. There's a bridge already existing there, and right now the bike path just ends. And so this would actually make the connection from that bridge all the way over to Finney Crossing. And so we've designed that in as an important component to the neighborhood. There's a large park area as described and shown on the plan in the middle western portion of the property, and we certainly are working through what that exactly looks like, but and the different parts and pieces, and we understand the Conservation Commission has a couple of comments that we certainly can work through and address as we get further into the property. We also do have some smaller pocket parks, or our land planner calls them mews, M-E-W-S. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but if you look along Alpine Drive in the middle of the proposed neighborhood, there is green spaces where townhomes face each other. They're rear-loaded townhomes, and there is a green pathway between those. We've also tried to preserve what we're calling the Grove, which is in the northeastern corner behind some duplexes and adjacent to a future stormwater pond. We are here tonight as pre-application to really gather information, hear comments both from the board, to gather information from the staff and also from the public about our proposed neighborhood. We understand and realize that there are benefits to getting feedback and comments from everyone, in that over time we do find that those comments are beneficial and helpful in terms of deciding the next steps. However, this is pre-app, so we are very early in the process. And for us, really, pre-application means that if we are allowed to move forward, we're allowed to move forward to growth management. And once we have growth management, then at that point, we start refining and working on more and more details. And we realize that things will change between now and when the discretionary permit will be submitted, but the general outline is what our goal is here to get feedback on at this point. So I think I would leave it at that, unless, Andy, is there anything else you'd like to add?
Not at this point, no.
Okay. So before I turn it over to the DRB members for questions, there's been a staff first pass at recommendations and a motion. There's a number of recommendations. They total 10, with several subcategories. Is there anything in that body of work that you take exception to or makes you take pause?
Couple of fairly minor ones, but I guess we would look for the DRB's feedback in regards to the Hacks comment on the general street layout. They were leaning towards a more gridded street network versus the more meandering network that's proposed on the sketch plan. If the DRB could give us direction on that. Again, as Chris said, looking way ahead to refining the plan. And another very minor one, number 8, the shared parking study. The only mixed use, or the only commercial use that we have, non-residential, is the the senior housing. And it's unlikely that with only one non-residential use that there would be much potential for shared parking.
Understood. Anything else, Chris?
I've read this before and I didn't highlight anything of drastic note, so I would say no.
Okay. Okay. DRB members, questions?
This is Dave Turner speaking. I was wondering if you could give us a general idea of what you think the flow of traffic would be going on to Chelsea Place and Dunmore, especially if Beaudry is kept as a driveway type entrance.
Well, I think that in terms of use of that connection, may be used by some of the homes that are closest to it. However, in my unqualified review, there are too many turns and entrances and exits for someone to want to use that as a primary path. That the connections either through Chelsea or on Dunmore require several turns, and it would be easier to exit onto Route 2A in most cases than traveling through that path.
Okay. One more question for you is on the park, will there have you considered lighting at night, minimum lighting around the park or anything for people to have outdoor activities at night?
We probably have not thought about it being fully lit. Maybe there's one path or some section that's minimally lit, but that it doesn't become a overlit area. And
Right.
the problem is once you start lighting it, you have to light it so often that it ends up being overlit. But we can certainly work through that, but I think there's probably some areas or maybe some zone within it that maybe we could light appropriately with some sort of connection lighting.
Anything else, Dave?
One other item is have you a community pool for the members of the park? I can't remember if I read something about that or not, so sorry if it has been addressed already. Have you considered that, having a community pool in the area?
A community pool in the area? We have not considered that. We are relatively constrained within the park area based upon the upland area and the wetland buffers in the Class 2 wetlands in that area. And so the park area, we do want to make sure that it's open. And so adding too many structures or components within that may limit that open spaces.
Anything else, Dave?
I'm set for now.
Okay. Other DRB members?
I had a question for, I think more from Matt in trying to unpack the Beaudry Lane access piece. Just reading back through the staff notes, the 50-foot right-of-way that exists today, is that owned, does somebody own that right-of-way, or is that town of Williston right-of-way, that 50-foot right-of-way?
I'm going to let the applicant cover that at first.
Okay.
I believe that is property that is owned by, or that is part of the Essex Alliance Church property. Again, I'm going off the existing conditions plan that was done for the church. Their plans indicate that that strip of land that includes the existing Beaudry Lane is owned by the church out to Route 2A, and I would presume that those property owners have some right to use it.
I do not believe that the town owns any existing rights over that strip.
Okay.
We looked for that in the history and didn't see it, but I don't want to say I'm 100% sure on that, David.
Okay.
And there was some discussion in our meeting with Public Works that there might have been an irrevocable offer of dedication.
I was thinking
Was
there,
was that on
there may have
Alpine?
been for Alpine, but I'm
Okay.
not sure that Beaudry ever got to that point.
Okay.
So what Andy, what you were saying is there may have been for Alpine, but not Beaudry under the
That was a
church
question we had,
application.
that presumably Alpine, because it appears to always have been intended to be a primary access to this property, that there may be an irrevocable offer for Alpine, but it seems unlikely that either the church or the prior project ever got to that point.
Yeah. So David, I think where you're getting is you're sort of asking about some of the facts that might play into what could be constructed and the element we raised in the staff report about nonconformity. Is that right?
Yeah. And I guess to the question about, can a public street be constructed within a 50-foot right-of-way? Just to note, probably 90% of the roads in Vermont have 50-foot rights-of-way. That's pretty standard across the state, and so without a doubt, it could definitely happen within 50 feet. I guess it's more of a question: is that a select board decision if we need to modify or get a waiver from the public works specifications, or do we have that ability?
So unless they are altered, the public works specifications just control, how anything that is a public or private street is to be built. Where it gets a little murky is whether the way this was created creates any sort of a toehold. We do know from prior experience in Williston and prior legal opinions that when a street is platted in a substandard right-of-way or in a way that might not be approvable today, but not constructed, applicants may be able to have the benefit of that platted street and build that street with what they have. So that's come up in a couple of subdivisions in Williston in the last few years. Oftentimes we're dealing with a 60-foot right-of-way instead of 64, or we're dealing with a right-of-way that's close to the center line of a named stream that creates a setback issue. So this one's a little different in that it's a little bit smaller. You're right about the physical size of a road. Much of what the town specifies can be constructed in fewer than 64 feet, but all of the public works specifications for streets specify a 64-foot right-of-way with a street constructed in more or less in the center of that right-of-way.
Mm-hmm. And barring anything like a wetland nearby or stream or something, there's no way to get a waiver or to modify those on a case-by-case basis.
I don't see that. There's a sort of a nod to flexibility as it relates to projects that provide affordable housing, but it's not really very well constructed within the specification. We encountered that once. The gospel generally on public works specs is it's up to the select board to alter them as an amendment to them and as a matter of policy, as opposed to going in and waiving them for individual projects.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, Matt.
Yep.
I'm going to force a segue here then, using this as a jumping off point. Matt, is this something that could be included in a specific plan and get that smaller right-of-way approved as part of a specific plan?
A specific plan is about clarifying the requirements of the zoning bylaw. The public works specifications exist outside of the bylaw, so probably not. Or if a specific plan included a street that was to be constructed on a narrower right-of-way, that would still probably have to be agreed upon through some process, whether it was amendment to the specifications, addition of another street spec to the specifications, some kind of select board act beyond what is done to modify the zoning bylaw.
All right. David, did you have anything else before I jump in?
Nope, that's all you, John.
Okay. So, Chris and Andy, thank you for this. Clearly, you put a lot of thought into this, and I appreciate that, so that we actually have something to comment on. A couple thoughts. The first one I wanted to mention was, interestingly enough, Andy, exactly what you went to begin with, which was the comment from the hack about the meandering paths through the site versus a grid of streets. And I think I got a sense of that from Chris's response a moment ago, but you know, I guess I would ask you first your thinking on precisely why you don't have the grid, the rigid grid, and why you have the pathways shown on the plans that you do.
I will certainly comment on that. I definitely spent quite a bit of time considering the different avenues that we could pursue on the property in terms of the street layout. And I would go, I think there's a couple of real strong points here. One, you know, this is a place where people are going to live, and we want to create a neighborhood, and we want to create a place in which, one, I have to say that in the grid street scenario, I find that people drive faster within neighborhoods when you have that. So number one, there's some just by having bends and adjustments within roads and with having some on-street parking, that is going to slow traffic down within the neighborhood. So that's one important piece. The other piece is I like adjustments personally within roadways. And that means that we have homes and buildings that are facing the road slightly differently. And I'll use the apartment building number, I'll call it number 2. It's the second apartment building as you drive in Alpine Drive. You're gonna see it's on an angle and it's not square to the road. And that was done on purpose. And it's not an idea that was driven by the roadway. It was an idea of like, let's look at this building in a different context than a straight view of it. And so by creating some adjustments like that along with the roadways, it does allow for us and forces us to show off different elevations and be a bit more creative so that we can create some differentiation between homes within the neighborhood. The other piece is, I think we have some components that are grid-like, but you know, we do feel that people like going to their home in an area where there are some jogs and bends within the roads. And that over time with the neighborhoods that I've been involved with over the last 25 years, we have consistently provided some different design on the layout, and that really has been beneficial for our ability to sell homes and also for the people who live there, because it is different than what you see in many other proposed neighborhoods. So I'm probably the driver of the bends in a lot of ways. And then there's also the wetland constraints force us to have some differentiation and we're trying to stay outside of buffers, but also utilize the land as efficiently as possible.
Thank you for that. So as we enter into then more of a conversation type of thing, which we do here at pre-app, with all respect to the HAC, and I know they do a great job and they've been looking at this a lot and they have some very good comments in there. I would also, I would tend to agree with you at this point. You know, the second item I like as a designer, I appreciate the variety of the edges along there that non-gridded layout gives. But I think that the biggest concern that I'm going to have on this whole site plan is this traffic flow piece. You know, the traffic study I think is going to be important. Clearly it's one of the most important issues from in the comment letters that we've been seeing. I think it's something that we need to address, and we need to make sure that we're not creating insurmountable problems here with people trying to cut through. And I agree with you that not creating a big straight avenue that connects one entrance point to another, it will actually slow traffic down to the point of perhaps even making it not a shortcut. I know that at some point the people using these streets to cut through are really residents. I don't see anybody cutting through this neighborhood, at least not right off. And again, I've only been looking at this for a day or so. But I don't see it right off as a shortcut for people who don't live in these neighborhoods to go through. But we need to make it convenient for people to connect and move through. Hopefully people who live in the neighborhoods are going to be respectful of everyone's children, cars, property. You know, what the people in this neighborhood will be potentially cutting through other adjacent neighborhoods, but that works both ways, and you'll have people from those neighborhoods cutting through this one as well. So I think you need to manage that, and we can't say it's not going to happen, but we need to make it so that it's safe and it addresses people's concerns. I feel that this is going to be probably the #1 issue as we look at this site plan. The one interesting thing, I don't know, is the little circle that you drew with the 10-minute walks and the 5-minute walks. It's interesting that you drew an exact circle there, because that assumes that you can walk in those straight lines. I prefer something that shows if you were to walk along your paths, how far do you get in 5 minutes or 10 minutes? The interesting thing is, for example, that the 10-minute circle and the arrow to it, I think, got you on the other side of the Allen Brook. Nobody's going to walk there because there's no connection across that brook to any of those neighborhoods on the other side of the brook. And I would love for you to consider some kind of a connection across there to those neighborhoods for a pedestrian or bike path connection from those neighborhoods across the Allen Brook, so that everyone doesn't have to walk all the way down into, through Indian Ridge to get there. Anyway, that's just a comment there. I think that if we really want to think about a system of pedestrian connections in town, this is an opportunity that we have. So I have just a couple more comments. One, I notice on your 5 of 9 that you're talking about wide sidewalks. I think by the time you get to DP, you might want to look at that language carefully to make sure that the wide sidewalks are actually doing what that asks for, because it seems to talk more about commercial uses, places to eat on, for restaurants and things like that, and not so much for residential applications. So just make sure that you've got your ducks in order on that one if you're relying on that. And lastly, I would ask you your thoughts. I'm sure you've had conversations with staff about specific plan. It's something obviously the DRB is probably going to be discussing here as we move into deliberations and whatnot. I would just ask you to tell me what you think about that process.
I certainly can. We definitely have had some discussions about specific plan. Definitely had thoughts about specific plan. We do think that in this particular neighborhood proposal that there is a potential for a specific plan application. And what we would like to do is proceed with the current application in the current form, going through growth management to start that process. And at the same time, we are or will be getting organized to submit a specific plan application that can run concurrently as the current program moves forward as well. So there are constraints within the growth management system that I have looked at. This was probably maybe a little less than a year ago, about how long the growth management process would be potentially for this proposed neighborhood, and it puts us out past 2032. And so we're talking about a long time frame through the growth management process. I understand that process, so because I understand it and I understand how to work through it, we feel like we want to preserve our rights and go through that process now, along with having a specific plan application, submitting a specific plan application, which I have not done, and it happens rarely, and at least that's my understanding, and that it also includes a whole different groups of people and review processes that I have not been involved in before. And so that to me seems like could run at the same time as our normal deliberations and process through the DRB. So my answer is yes. I'm interested in pursuing the specific plan because there may be benefits in terms of the growth management process. There will be some challenges associated with this specific plan application, but I think that there is enough opportunity to pursue that. At the same time, I'd also like to continue to pursue this existing process.
Right. Well, as you know, having listened to Matt here earlier in the meeting, that the impetus seems to be the form-based zoning process that's in place, and I know more than one of the DRB members took part in that several months ago. There are some really exciting potential there with that new code, and what we have here is we've got an opportunity or actually a responsibility to review this plan that you're putting forward. But this is the last large open space that could comply with the form-based code. And it's something that as a DRB member, I'm going to take very seriously, and I really want to make sure that we're not kind of crippling that for this part of town here just because it's not in place yet. So we're all going to be kind of walking a little bit of a plank here in terms of trying to thread our way through, and really, because we're all trying to make Williston a better place here, and this is a tremendous opportunity for all of us, and I think it's important that we all get it right here. So anyway, I appreciate the thought that's gone into this so far, and the consultant.
Kind of going in.
Page 10 of your stuff.
Yeah, that's a class 2 wetland.
That's the
buffer.
that's the setback, right?
And the buffer.
That's the
That's the
buffer,
buffer. The red is the buffer.
Yeah.
The red's the buffer.
No, there'll be quite a bit of open space, but not like a soccer field. That's correct, because of the wet. For whatever reason, and so the northern section could be private. That could be private. The blue line would remain private. It could become public.
What I'm trying to say is that will become the main access for people on the northern part of Beaudry if they don't have access to 2A.
Yes.
Off of Beaudry Lane.
Yes. Yes.
Now,
They would stay within the neighborhood and then turn right onto Alpine Drive to go out to 2A.
You got it. So that, I'm just saying is that private drive would suddenly become a fair thoroughfare for that complex. That's if you lose Beaudry Lane.
Yep.
As an access. And then my other item is, just to make sure we have an understanding, this development will not have on-street overnight parking, correct? So in other words, on Beaudry Lane, Alpine Drive, and that, people will not be parked on that street at night, correct?
I think there could be parking. I'm not sure of the town's winter parking ordinance, but I think on-street parking, we're not proposing that on-street parking would be prohibited during the summer months, but I'm assuming that the town's winter maintenance policy is that there would be no overnight parking from whenever that begins, end of November, beginning of December through April 15th, thereabouts.
So is it fair to say that it would be similar to how it works in Finney Crossing right now?
Correct.
Along Zephyr Road.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
If there's on-street parking,
Right.
those wouldn't be
So
allowed in the
it's
winter.
overnight is allowed during the non-restricted winter months.
That's correct.
Does that answer your question, Paul?
Well, then I'm really leaning towards what the police chief said, where we're going to need to probably limit parking to one side or the other, because you could end up having a situation where you don't even have the width for a fire engine to get down the road if there's parking on both sides at night, or even during the daytime if they're parking on both sides. It's only 28 foot. That's not a lot of space. But we'll move on to the next item.
Okay, do you have a next item, Paul, or are you passing the?
I'm going to pass on because the next item is I'm leaning more towards the lighter density than the higher density, since there's no affordable housing in this complex. Pass my rest of my time on to the next person.
Okay. So, we've heard from Paul, we've heard from John, we've heard from Dave Saladino, we've heard from Dave Turner. Before I open it up for public comment, I'd like to give the DRB members an opportunity to address the applicant with anything that has arisen while you listen to fellow DRB members ask questions.
I don't have any.
Yeah, I'd just like to remind DRB members that the Public Works standards is out of the DRB purview, so we really can't weigh in on this. And although I respect and appreciate the input and the thoughts, it's not something that we weigh in on.
I just wanted to add that on a public street, whether parking is allowed or prohibited is a matter that's typically decided by the select board. In Williston, public streets are understood to allow parking along them where a vehicle can be parked outside of the traveled portion of the roadway unless they're posted otherwise. What we see in our more modern streets in the growth center, and Zephyr Road and Finney Crossing is a good example, is the street is designed in some places to accommodate street parking. In other places, it's not designed to accommodate street parking. And generally, having a street that sort of dictates where parking is appropriate and not by its form is really helpful in ensuring that what happens is still accessible to emergency vehicles and things like that.
Right.
But yeah, going off your comment, the street design comes from the public works specs. The parking policy comes from the select board.
Thank you. Okay, so at this point, we're going to segue into the public comment phase of tonight's hearing. What I would like to do is I would like to do this in a sequence. There are several people that are present here in the town meeting hall. I'd like to start with them. And if any of you present have comments that you would like to address, you would address the DRB, which in this case is me, because I'm the only member of the DRB present here. I'd like you to go to this area here, which is for the public comments, and if you would state your name and address for the record, please, that would be appreciated. Sir, welcome.
My name is Carol Laws, and I live on 244 Dunmore Lane in Finney Crossing. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk with you. I did send a short email to Emily this afternoon, and I don't know whether it's been distributed.
It has been.
Not, but I'd like to read it for everybody's benefit. My name is Carol Laws. My wife Joanne and I live at 244 Dunmore Lane at Finney Crossing and are abutters to the proposed development. Our home is at the northeast corner of the intersection where the unnamed public street meets Dunmore Lane / Chelsea Place. We have two main concerns. Number one, traffic. In reviewing the proposed layout of the housing units, it seems obvious that the majority of the traffic will exit to Dunmore Lane, as it is the shortest and quickest way out of the development. Dunmore Lane has several good reasons for being the most favored exit of the three exits. A, easiest access to the interstate with half, 3 versus 6, as many traffic signals as the other two exits. Easiest access to the box stores such as Walmart, Home Depot, Best Buy, Staples, and so on. Easiest access to many restaurants, shops, and service stations. And there will be no need to pass through Taft's Corners. We would assume that there would be traffic lights at the Beaudry Lane and Alpine Drive exits, but if not, essentially all of the traffic would certainly try to use Dunmore Lane. We hope a detailed traffic study will be required, and I understand it's going to be, and we appreciate that. And I've made some guesses as to what I think the traffic might be, and they may be correct, or they may be grossly incorrect. I'm not a traffic engineer. In the absence of that at this time, we would estimate that currently 50 vehicles per day travel Dunmore Lane. If we assume one round trip per day from each proposed unit, that equals 342 times 2 equals 686 vehicles. If one half use the Dunmore exit, that is 343 vehicles. If we assume 3/4 uses the If we assume 3/4 of them use it, it is 514 vehicles. So let's say 300 to 500 additional vehicles will pass by our home each day. That, in our opinion, will turn Dunmore Lane from a safe, pleasant, residential street into an unsafe, heavily traveled public street. There are 20 carriage homes on Dunmore Lane that quote unquote back their vehicles onto Dunmore Lane. I should digress a bit here and say that this is an older neighborhood. The average age for people in the carriage homes is probably 70, and it probably goes from 55 to 90. And there are no children that live in carriage homes. So it's an older neighborhood with drivers who may not be as quick or agile or see or hear as well as some younger people. So I think that's that's something that should be considered. The additional traffic, okay, I said there are 20 carriage homes on the Dunmore Lane that back their vehicles onto Dunmore Lane. This additional traffic will potentially create some serious traffic hazards. For one reason or another, many carriage home residents park their vehicles on the street, again creating potential traffic hazards. The second item we have concerns about is the multi-use path. Our property and 2 other carriage homes on Half Moon Lane back up to the proposed multi-use path. The back portion of our homes have master bedrooms, and therefore it is very important that there be proper, effective, and attractive screening to provide privacy. It is also important that the screening not be too high as we all enjoy the sunsets. Summary and general comments. Number 1, traffic. As laid out, this is a serious problem for all Finney Crossing residents, especially Dunmore Lane. We just don't believe that Dunmore Lane can safely handle this very significant increased volume of traffic. We would hope the DRB would revert back to the church concept of using Dunmore Lane only as the emergency exit. And I have heard the discussions here that there's some pre-existing conditions about that exit. I didn't know at the time. And under no circumstances do we recommend construction vehicles be allowed on that access. The multi-use path, privacy is a concern, but it can be handled by proper screening. And then here are some kind of general comments that some of you have touched on, some of you haven't. Carriage home locations. We appreciate that the developer did not provide multi-story units on the east side of the project, thus blocking our sunset views. Parks and park area. We think the Grove, the Townhouse Mews, and MUP trails are a good idea. The park area activity center is a nice idea, but we see little use as it's too far from the center of the whole complex. And please don't take this the wrong way. The fire pit will be a maintenance disaster. I don't have one, but I've seen people who have and wonder about it. General comments. A, pool/clubhouse. They should be considered similar to the Finney Crossing as they are very important to help develop a sense of community. Tennis, pickleball, and basketball courts should be considered, especially pickleball, because as many of you know, that's a very popular sport right now, which many people enjoy. Our gut feeling is there are too many units in this size area. We don't see open areas like Finney Crossing. And then I have a question about where are the storm drains? I didn't see them on the small scale plans that we had. And then I make a comment that all public streets should have street lights. And close by saying thank you for giving us the opportunity to make our comments, and we hope that they're helpful and useful.
Thank you. Quick comment on level of design detail at this stage in the process. It's limited.
I understand.
It's limited by design.
I understand.
So there'll be, when this plan reaches the discretionary phase, there'll be all those details with storm drain inlets identified, street lights, etc.
Right. I understand and I appreciate that. I just wanted to give you some upfront comments on it.
Thank you.
And by the way, I was on the Williston Planning Commission for 10 years, so I know the effort that you folks put in before your time.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Good evening. My name is Carl Fowler. I live at 178 Meadow Run Road. I'm the former president of the Meadow Run Association, but I am speaking tonight exclusively as a resident, not on behalf of our association. Our current president is also here. I admire much of the thought that's gone into this plan. In particular, I support the decision to do roads that are curved and the preservation of large amounts of open space inside the development. I think that is remarkable. My concern is the sheer volume of units and the traffic that they will inevitably generate, and the impact that the spillover will have onto Route 2A, whether it's one exit at Alpine or two with Alpine and Beaudry. The road is already a veritable parking lot each afternoon around 2 o'clock, again around 4 o'clock, and in the mornings in the 8 to 9 period. In the last month alone, I've had to wait 5 minutes on more than one occasion just to get a left turn out of my neighborhood. And additional cars going onto 2A present a real design problem on 2A. It's not really the fault of this development, but 2A has a long blind spot going north on it from Taft Corners in the direction of Essex Junction. As you pass Alpine and you begin to descend down towards Beaudry and down towards Allen Brook, you quite literally cannot see the bridge of the brook, and in some cases you cannot see the exact location of the traffic jam that's already forming in front of you. That's bad enough. But decisions to permit this much more traffic to go on to 2A spills over into our neighborhood and other neighborhoods as well. The town has recently authorized the development of portions of the farm that lies between Mountain View and Meadow Run. And that will be accomplished by the extension of Whitewater Drive over to Mountain View. That does create an easily recognizable alternate route to the infamous Industrial Way 2A Mountain View intersection. But in so doing, we'll increase the volume of traffic passing through our neighborhood and do it quite dramatically. If you pour additionally the traffic from a 270 plus unit development onto 2A, without 2A itself at least being re-engineered dramatically, you create a cascading series of issues that will affect multiple neighborhoods beyond the one we're discussing. And I'm also sympathetic with the problems going over into Finney Crossing. I wondered if there might be any way that the outlets from this development could include a fourth exit or could include a reduction in the sheer number of units. I also note the absence of any low-income housing in the development. That I think is an unfortunate design issue. But my primary concern is that I simply do not see how this intense a development on the acreage footage that it's being proposed for can be accomplished without creating what will be a series of problems elsewhere in our community. And I hope that this can be rethought considerably before it proceeds further. Reduced in its size and footprint, made more spacious in the interior, made a bit easier. There are between Forest Run and Meadow Run about 80 living units, not that many buildings.
It's just my screen that's messed up.
Do we want to try switching over to the owl?
I'm trying to get the engineer on this.
Okay.
Are you certain there's still problems?
No, not certain about anything.
Okay.
One participant saying that it does seem better, please continue. So people who are participating on Zoom, if it sounds like we're breaking up, please drop a message in the chat. That way we know to pause things.
Okay, great.
Please proceed.
Sorry
Thank you.
for that interruption.
Okay. This development vehicles will use ingress and egress points 365 days a year, and the church's major use of roads access would be principally on days when there would have been church services or activities, which would not be 365 days a year. With this proposed development and two earlier approved and allocated developments in 2021 off Mountain View Road, the Michaud, and the Catamount Golf Course, it is estimated that once all three developments are completed, that there will be an additional 600 additional cars traveling to and from Route 2A in Williston. Can this highway absorb all this additional traffic? Say nothing about construction vehicles during the construction phase of all three projects, or the service vehicles that will have to service these new communities. Presently, there is an engineering study and some engineering work in process to expand the width of Route 2A from Bittersweet Development to just past Meadow Run Road, short of the Alderbrook Bridge, where once again Route 2A will neck down to a 2-lane road from Alderbrook Bridge to the light at Taft's Corner. This is the area of the proposed Snyder Group development on the EAC property. The Snyder Development Group is correct in their statement that the parcel is well connected to the existing transportation network. The question is the existing transportation network ready for the traffic influx that will be thrust upon it should this development be approved? We think not. What about water and sewer allocations? Is there enough pumping station capacity and sewage treatment capacity in Essex to accommodate this proposed development? We don't know that, and that, I believe that was addressed in the overview, that will have to be taken into account. What about air pollution from backed up traffic on the undersized Route 2A highway? There are times where in the present the traffic has backed up from Five Corners and beyond in Essex Junction to the interstate. How will this proposed development further impact this already difficult traffic situation? It won't be good. Before this project and any other mega projects are approved, we encourage the DRB and the town of Williston planners need to engage in a conversation with the state, Chittenden County Regional Planning about how to restart the Cirque Highway from the Winooski River to Route 89 as proposed in the 1960s and shelved by former Governor Shumlin in 2011. There was $100 million spent on land acquisition for the Cirque. Are we in 2021 using that investment to the best advantage? What could be done to serve us better in 2021 for the next 50 to 100 years? Your next decisions will tell us whether the investment was good or bad for the Williston and Chittenden County community. We ask that this project be put on hold and that a moratorium be placed on any further consideration or approval of any mega developments without addressing the implications of developments on existing infrastructure problems. Let's get the infrastructure correct so that there's responsible and safe development in Williston. These decisions will be with us for the next 50 to 100 years. Thank you for listening. And Chris, you played hockey with my son. So I've known Chris a long time. I've known his parents for a long time. This is very difficult to stand here. I am not opposed personally, now I'm going to speak from a personal standpoint, to development. I'm really not. You've been at this for 20 years. Have you proposed or pushed to have the Cirque Highway revisited so that a highway that should have been built 40 years ago could better serve this community today?
So I'm gonna intervene here.
That's fine.
And say that that's a little outside of the scope of this application, so you're off the hook.
Thank you.
I understand that. But I have to ask it anyway, Chris.
We understand.
All right.
We certainly understand the perspective.
I want to thank you. You people have done a great job.
Thank you.
It may be too much. Time will tell whether it's right on. We all know that.
Yeah.
I look at your plan. I have to say that I just checked something called Hunt Stand, and there's a narrow right-of-way on the property boundary that goes out to Baudry. It looks narrower than the other one that goes out by VSECU, which kind of tells me on a map, a projected map, that it's narrow. And good luck on that one.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Thank
thank you. Okay, so now I'm going to turn it over to Emily, who controls who speaks next from the audience at large that is participating virtually. So Emily, take it over, please.
All right, if you're participating on Zoom, press the raise hand button on the reaction section of your toolbar or comment in the chat to let me know if you would like to speak. When it's your turn, I'll call your name and you can unmute yourself. So press the raise hand button on the toolbar. All right, looks like Steve Avery has raised his hand. Steve, go ahead and speak. You can turn your video on as well, if you prefer.
Thank you. Turn on the video here.
And please state your name and address for the record.
Steve Avery, I'm the VP of Facilities with the Vermont State Place Credit Union. The address of our facility is 1755 Essex Road. So my comments or our comments and concerns are really around traffic, like a lot of other folks. Alpine Drive serves as the primary, is the only access to our ranch, and we're concerned about long-term traffic issues, especially at the intersection of Alpine Drive and Route 2A, as well as the construction traffic. Those are our primary concerns. We're excited about the project. It looks like we're excited to see something happen out back and for that parcel to be developed. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. If anyone else would like to speak, please comment in the chat or press the raise hand button on the toolbar. Ian Campbell, you are up next.
Hey, Chris Snyder, Ian Campbell. I haven't seen you for 35 years since we graduated. Good to see you. I'm going to try to do this little thing here about screen sharing and see if you can understand. It's not going to work here. Oh, this is disabled screen sharing. Well, maybe it will work. Colleen, my ex-wife, lives on Zephyr Road, and I've watched your development quite closely, and I look at all the open spaces that are in your development within the circles of roads, as well as Chelsea Place, which predates that. And I guess what I'm most concerned about is about the density of living units. How we have all of the usable space for recreation consolidated in one area. I understand that space is a premium, but at the same time, I wonder why there can't be more space in between units. It's tough when you have a urban community that's growing like Taft Corners, and how it varies from Williston Village itself. Essex Junction versus Essex Town is kind of the same way. But what's very curious to me is how Finney Crossing itself seems to have more of a green space initiative in place, whereas your new area seems to try to condense people's property altogether and leave it to a common area, a single common area, as opposed to the multiple ones that are currently at in Finney Crossing for people to aim to. There's a certain benefit of having space around you, whether you're coming out from your vehicle, going into your garage, or whether you have a space to look out through your window, whether back or forward, where you can see open space and hear nothing but silence, or just get the feeling of there being volume around you. And I am very concerned that with the limited amount of space between some of these units, that may not be the appeal that people find. Of course, I'm not talking about the area bounding Allen Brook, because that's all going to be designated as being preserved, but it seems to be very condensed. And even though I like how the structure is of the overall layout, it's almost as if that kind of condensed living is more appropriate, more to the center of Taft's Corners as opposed to the area leading out. As far as traffic flow goes, Mr. Laws spoke very well about it, both the email that he sent before as well as what he said today, but that's all for other planning to address. Two-way is definitely going to become a major artery, and whether the has to be created to be able to circumvent that remains to be seen. But as far as what you're proposing, I'm more concerned about whether this is going to be a area where people say, I like living here, I like the space that I have around me, as opposed to what people currently have in Finney Crossing. It just seems like there's a much more greater density in this area, and that concerns me because it's promoting a higher density living, but ever that little bit further away from Taft's Corners, as opposed to what Finney Crossing currently has. So apologies for rambling, but again, I wish I could screen share so you could see the image that I have on my screen of the proposed plan layered on top of what Finney Crossing currently is. It just seems to be a great condensation or great merging together of people and density, as opposed to what currently exists, even closer to Taft's Corners. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ian. What is your address for the record?
I live in Brennan Woods, 117 Hannon. My ex-wife, Colleen, who shares custody with my children, lives on Zephyr Road, 574.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
For anyone who is on Zoom, press the raise hand button if you would like to speak or comment in the chat. So far, I'm seeing no one else on the list. For our telephone participant, you can press *9 to mute or unmute, or *6 to raise your hand. I'm seeing no other raised hands and no comments in the chat.
Okay. DRB members, any closing remarks or comments for the applicant, please?
I said enough earlier. I'm done.
I don't have anything, Pete.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Dave Turner?
I'm good.
Okay, Paul?
I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Chris and Andy, any final remarks or summary?
I think we took a lot of good notes. I appreciate the comments. I do think, obviously, traffic is a concern along Route 2A. It's an existing concern. And I realize that's outside of my purview, outside of really the DRB's purview, and, we understand that there are some challenges associated with that. I do think that in terms of, other comments and layouts and open spaces, and I think one of the things that we have found is that some of these pocket parks work reasonably well and address some people's uses, but larger open spaces actually get used more. And that's one thing that we found at Finney Crossing. And so that's something that's learned from use, but it's also in the current drawing and layout of the overall neighborhood, you know, I think it's also pretty blocky. So there's more dimension and there's more space in here than probably what you're seeing on a 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I do want to acknowledge that there's probably more open space, and because the roadways are wide and those components are going to be there. But in general, I appreciate the comments and certainly understand people's concerns.
Okay, thank you, Chris. So I'm going to close at 9:07. I'm going to close DP 21-18, the pre-app hearing. Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we are now going to go into deliberation at 9:08.
So for the participants on Zoom, the DRB is going to go into closed deliberations. I'll put everybody in the waiting room. It's TBD how long that's going to be. When the DRB comes out, they will make a decision. The other option would be to give staff a call or email tomorrow. We'll let you know what the DRB decided, and the draft minutes will be uploaded to the website later this week as well. For those of you who are remaining, I will place you in the waiting room now. Thank you.
You're back. Go, speak.
And the video's not showing up either.
Was muted. Speak.
Okay. Is there a motion for DP 21-18?
Yes, but I don't see Emily's notes. There we go. Yes, as authorized by WDB 6.6.3, I, David Turner, move the Williston Development Review Board, having reviewed the application submitted and all accompanying materials, including the recommendations of the town staff and the advisory boards required to comment on the application by the Williston Development Bylaw, and having heard and duly considered the testimony presented at the public hearing of September 14th, 2021, accept the recommendations for DP 21-18 and authorize this application to move forward to growth management review, as well as specified plan, specific plan with the following changes. Under item 6, we will strike the hack is not convinced the meandering layout contributes to the goals of the walkable, pedestrian-friendly neighborhood, considering small blocks of regular pattern of grid streets that will be struck. At the end of the next paragraph, we will add the DRB finds the meandering layout to be aesthetically pleasing and provides traffic calming. We will strike item D. Can you go down, Emily? Thank you. And item G, we will add the word consider and change it to consider community gathering and garden spaces. LaFave Lane is a good example of a neighborhood space with successful green, central green. Item H, we'll just add the word consider to the front of the paragraph. We will strike item 8. I believe that's it.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Is there a second?
I will second.
No, go ahead.
All right, Dave Saladino is first in. Dave Saladino seconds it. Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll go one by one, please. Yay or nay? Paul Christensen?
Nay.
John Hemmelgarn?
Yay.
Dave Saladino?
Yay.
Dave Turner?
Yay.
The chair is a yay. Motion carries 5 in favor, none opposed, and Scott Riley has abstained due to a financial interest in the project. So motion carries.
Actually, Pete, did Chris
I said nay.
Nay, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did not pick that up. Thank you. Okay, let me restate that then. Paul Christensen is not in favor. The motion carries 4 in favor, 1 opposed, and Scott Riley abstaining. So motion carries. Okay, next up is the approval of the minutes from August 24th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I move that we approve the minutes as, for the August 24th meeting as written.
Thank you, John. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Turner seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call. Paul Christensen?
Aye.
John Hemmelgarn?
Yay.
Dave Saladino?
Aye.
Dave Turner?
Yay.
Chair is in favor. Motion carries 5 in favor, none opposed. Okay, is there any new business before we adjourn?
No meeting on the 28th.
No meeting on the 28th. Okay, that's important business. Okay, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Dave Salatino makes a motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Dave Turner seconds it. Any further discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying yay.
Yay.
Yay?
Yay.
Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Pete.
Thanks.